Welcome to Real Talk, Real Estate Discussions with Andrew Kirsh. In each episode, Andrew interviews industry leaders. We'll hear their real-time opinions on today's market, their background and unique career highlights, and guidance for newcomers into the industry. You can find this show at sklarkirsh.com and on YouTube, LinkedIn, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and more. Now here's the host of Real Talk, Andrew Kirsh.
Episode 82 of Real Talk. It's October. It's the best time of year if you're a Dodger fan. Going tonight, NLDS Game 3. Hopefully the Dodgers take care of business and sweep the Phillies. By the time this posts, we'll be in the middle of the NLCS, where the Dodgers will hopefully be playing the Brewers or the Cubs. On this week's episode of Real Talk, we have Kevin Donner from Newmark on the show. He's not a Dodger fan. He's a lifelong Yankee fan. We'll see if they are able to stave off their deficit against the Blue Jays. Kevin Donner talks about his transition from being a broker in New York to coming out to LA. I give him a lot of credit for only being in LA for 4 years. I feel like Kevin Donner is one of the most prominent people in the real estate business in Los Angeles. And we also talk about how he's dealing with the aftermath of the Palisades fire, being a Palisadian resident, his rebuild efforts, and his stance on rebuilding the community. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Kevin Donner. Welcome to another edition of Real Talk. I'm here with my good friend, Kevin Donner, Executive Vice Chairman of Newmark. Kevin, welcome to the Real Talk podcast studio.
Thanks for having me. It's the most anti-lawyer law office I've ever been in. So it's good to say.
That's a positive, right?
It's a huge positive. I was shocked when I walked in here.
Yeah, no, we're very happy with this office. 1850 Sawtelle. I give a shout out to Alana Body, my client, friend, and landlord, and Jane Burbank, who you met, the designer. She took a shell of a building and created 3 unbelievable offices for myself. For Alana's executive suite is like a combination of the Aman Hotel meets Gordon Gekko Wall Street, and then his insurance broker, Venbrook. So it's just a great building.
That's cool space. Well, thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
So you've only been, how long have you been in LA?
4 years in August, a little bit over 4 years.
I feel like you know more people in that 4-year time, or have met more people in that 4-year time than anyone I've ever.
I call it speed dating, and I've been pretty deliberate about it. When I came out here, not knowing a lot of people, now a lot of institutional clients, right? But that doesn't necessarily translate into relationships. So I spent a lot of time getting to know people, and I tried to be, I don't want to say smart about it, but just getting to know people, personality and background, rather than talk about business. It would have been very presumptuous to come out and say, hey, this is who I am, this is my background now, how are we going to work together? It was, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 meetings. And, my wife jokes that I've done things that people, won't do in terms of driving. Like I'll, go to Beverly Hills for breakfast. I'll go downtown for lunch, go to like San Diego for a drink, and then, back up to the West Side for dinner, which you have to do, and you have to get to know people.
I mean, people won't even date each other if they're on opposite sides of the 405 freeway. And you just did 400 miles in that one day.
Well, listen, you and I lived in the Palisades, so you understand the virtues of never leaving that bubble, which I can totally appreciate now.
We'll talk about the Palisades. My wife would never go east of Burlingame. So in Brentwood, I should say she wouldn't go east of Amalfi when we were in the Palisades.
Well, that's like when we lived in New Jersey and people tried to make up all these towns as to where good restaurants were. And we just said, we had a rule, if we got on the highway to go to New York City. And that's what we realized here. It's why leave the Palisades and there's 4 or 5 good restaurants?
Yeah, true. So talk about your background.
Yeah.
Where'd you grow up, college, all that?
Yeah, background is a little bit different. I grew up on the East Coast, grew up in New Jersey, went to college in Vermont. After school, came back and worked in New York.
Is it the Vermont Bears?
The Catamounts.
Okay, I'm wrong.
We won the national championship in soccer last year, which was a shocker.
In Division 5 or
D1.
What? D1?
D1. So it was, on a golden goal, which, we'll be living off of that lore for the next 100 years.
And that gives you school pride that you're...
We have a national championship that's not skiing, which is great. So graduated in 98. And I was always...
You're 1 year younger than I am.
All right. Well, you look a lot better than I do.
Nah, I don't know. I like your hairline.
So, when we graduated, everyone either got into banking or they were a lawyer or a doctor. And so I did what I thought I had to do, and I got into banking. I always interned in the summer in New York City for banks, and I went out of school. I worked for the New York Stock Exchange corporate, and I worked at Goldman Sachs in New York City for 2 years, in San Francisco at Goldman for 2 years, and then came back and worked at Credit Suisse. And at 29, decided the luster of working at banks kind of wore off, and I was fortunate enough to meet who ended up being one of my partners, Doug Harmon, who I'd met him years before when I was living in San Francisco, asked if I wanted to come in and interview at Eastdil, which was then Eastdil, not Eastdil Secured. And they took a chance on me. They would never hire someone like me today, because real estate is, it's an asset class and it's an industry people really want to get into. At that time, it wasn't the case. And it was very fortunate, right? I owe a lot to.
So you weren't doing any real estate?
I had no real estate experience whatsoever. Yeah. So when I got in there, I was auditing classes at NYU at night, taking Argus classes, and was a little bit older, right? So I was able to take on maybe a little bit more workload, and was building the models, writing the OMs, doing the tours, and it was a great experience. And on the East Coast, especially at Eastdil, you're a generalist, so that's why we've always worked on all asset classes across the spectrum of equity. So I was there for close to 13 years at Eastdil. Then went through the Eastdil Secured, and was very lucky at the time in 2005. That's when we were part of the EOP transaction. I was one of the junior people on that, and part of a lot of other fund transactions, more structured than just typical sales. The GFC happened, so we learned about UCC foreclosures. Right?
Before we get into that, just curious, what would you say the life of being in the real estate brokerage world versus typical corporate finance, investment banking?
It was actually really similar. Like my schedule and my workload was very similar. Again,
how about dynamic of personalities?
Very similar, right? Because remember, Eastdil was considered a real estate investment bank. You're an advisor, so you have the ability to work on different types of transactions. I'd say the personality is very similar. Now, the lead brokers, and you like to say advisors, maybe that personality is a little bit different than like an M&A banker or someone who's leading like a merchant banking group. But the transactions are pretty similar, right? We were fortunate to work on very large deals, so the scope of it, was not dissimilar to like traditional banking. But at that time, remember, you couldn't work remotely, right? So you were going into the office on Saturdays and Sundays, getting in the office at 8 o'clock, work until 2, 3 in the morning. And what I tell junior people now is I wouldn't trade that for anything. Like the time of like eating in the boardroom with your colleagues at 9 in the morning. There were brutal but great times.
You mean 9 at night?
9 at night. Sorry. Yeah, 9 at night. So those were brutal times, but you appreciate the camaraderie, right?
I slept under my desk at Latham and Watkins too many times. And I don't think any associates would ever do that today.
No, when I talk to, and I go back to the business school at the University of Vermont, and I talk to a lot of the kids that are graduating, I give them advice. Number one is like, don't ask what your work schedule is, right? Is it flexible?
Yeah.
Right. That's the first thing you talk to them about. Right. Because they want to know what it looks like. If it's, is it a 4-day work week?
What's the work-life balance?
Yeah. That's a terrible indication. I think, you also played a sport in college. I played lacrosse in college. You always like hiring athletes, and you always look for that, whether it's a college athlete or they did in high school, because it's a different type of work ethic.
Totally agree. So anyway, continue. You were getting to the GFC.
So it's just with every cycle, you learn a different skill set.
Yeah.
Right. So then the GFC came, and we learned about the whole UCC foreclosure process. And that really kept the lights on for us in New York for a long time. That market's a little bit different out here in terms of the capital stacks. So, you take it for granted when you say capital stack, you don't really understand what that means. You do to some sense, a little bit of senior mortgages and a mezz in the equity, but you really learn what cash collateral is, quickly, and why that process is such. So we did a lot of that. And then the market took back off in 2010. And we were really fortunate to be in the middle of some really large transactions in New York and across kind of the Northeast and maybe a little bit further south on, we call the Amtrak corridor, kind of Washington up to Boston. And then our team left Eastdil in 2016 and went to Cushman & Wakefield, which was a great move for us. It was a partnership. It was 5 of us who left. I like to say you gambled on yourself, but we were pretty confident in going as a team. And that's, the important thing in our business is really to be part of a team, right? You can't do it on your own. And listen, I saw that when I came out here, that you can't do it on your own. You need to be part of seasoned, veterans is a loose term, but people who are in the market and are like-minded. So we left in 2016, which ended up being a really good move for us. And then fast forward, I moved out here in 2021 as part of Cushman & Wakefield, because while they had some people in Los Angeles, the idea was to really expand on the West Coast. In Los Angeles and New York are very similar in the sense that they're kind of hub and spoke markets where, kind of the center, and then you work with all the regional markets. And hopefully is that interplay between all the partners there to help generate business. So moved here in August of 21, and then our team, myself and the New York team, left and went to Newmark in February of 23. Just saw the opportunity, and it's impressive what Newmark has built over the course of my career, and it's become kind of the pristine shop now across the spectrum of capital markets, whether on the debt, on the equity, or structured finance. And that's where I am today. So I've been here for close to be close to 3 years.
Yeah, no, it's amazing. And I can't believe you only arrived here in 2021. I feel like you've been a fixture in the LA real estate market for decades.
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you.
So why the move from New York to LA?
We realized after we left in 2016 that you started to see a lot of capital coming to the West Coast. Not to say it wasn't in New York, we were starting to see a lot of the groups that we were close with and clients that are more national in scope, spending a lot more time on the West Coast. And you saw a lot of other, a lot of big opportunities. And we just didn't have an institutional business at Cushman at the time. Now, that's not to say anything disparaging about people that were here. It's just, the large business that we were used to and a lot of the clients. And we wanted to have someone out here, and we were flying cross country and pitching business. And a lot of the clients said, listen, we'd love to hire you, but you can't be flying in and out of the market, which I can totally appreciate now. It's not, I think New York is a lot easier of a market to understand than Los Angeles, because Los Angeles is so many different micro markets in a small area, that you need someone who's actually physically in the market. And it's different, right? You don't have the big trophies, right? You have campuses, you don't have the big trophies like New York. So you have to really understand the market here. And what we were trying to do at Cushman was not dissimilar to what we had at Eastdil, of this collaboration, this capital markets team, not siloed brokerages, but how can you tie it all together? And by having one of the partners on the West Coast for the team, we could actually, help kind of bridge the gap there.
So you mentioned that you noticed in 2016, a lot of capital wanting to go to the West Coast, specifically LA. Is that still the case in 2025?
I don't think you're not seeing as much. Not to say that that's permanent, but I think there's definitely been a sense of a pause. On the institutional side. Maybe on the multifamily, but we all know the issues with office. You're not seeing as much institutional capital coming to the West Coast, unless it's a unique situation. For example, if you had a Century City office tower for sale, you'd get a wide spectrum of institutional and international investors. But other than that, it's still kind of on pause.
Yeah. So what you said you were a generalist at Eastdil. Are you still a generalist? Are there certain asset classes that you personally focus on?
I try to be.
How is that possible? I mean, so many brokers, most brokers are so specific as to asset classes. How have you been able to maintain being?
I'd say over the course of my career, probably did more office than anything, than multifamily and retail. And retail, by virtue of being New York, is more high street. But like I was mentioning before, we all learned to Argus through building mall portfolios, or more mall models. So I've done a fair amount of that over time. But office and multi, probably the two largest that I've done. But it's from a high level, when you're talking to clients, understanding, equity allocations, what people are looking for. Now, I've worked on hotel deals. I'm not a hotel specialist, right? I've worked on a fair amount of industrial. I'm not an industrial specialist. So if we were to bring in deals like that, we bring in those siloed teams, but it's working with those specialists to help generate business.
When you are pitching to win deals, to be their broker, does it help to be a generalist so you can talk about other asset classes, or are clients looking for just sharpshooters and they just want a specialist in that particular asset class?
Well, they definitely want the specialist, but it's also helpful when you're pitching the business, right? Because it's like when you do an OM, right? You go macro to micro. It's exactly what you were getting at. You want to talk about what's happening in the market, right? If you're pitching an industrial deal, like, why is this capital source looking at industrial versus office, and how's that being allocated? So you really want to speak to the themes in the market at the time, and then you drill down into the specific asset class. And that's where it's important to have someone who's day-to-day working within that, whether it's industrial or office or retail or, data centers, obviously a big alternative right now. We'd love to work on data center deals. However, you bring in a specialist and a team, an infrastructure team to work on that.
Yeah. So what is your perception sitting here, almost October, by the time of this launches, probably mid-October of 25 of the market? The Fed reduced rates by 25 bips, likely to, did I say raise? Lower rates by 25, probably another 25 to 50 before the end of the year. From my perspective as a lawyer at Sklar Kirsh, transactional volume over the last 4 or 5 months has been just steadily increasing in transactional volume. Yet another segment of my client base has been frustrated that they can't get deals done. That capital is unrealistic with the returns that they're looking for, wanting a net 18 or a gross 20. And my clients are saying that's just impossible. Or if it's a construction deal, capital wanting a return on cost of a 7, and developers are saying impossible. So what are you seeing out there?
I think you're still seeing that sense of pause, right? It is, I don't want to say unrealistic, because I think investors have been so conditioned over the last 3 to 4 years as to what returns are, right? Yield on cost is a perfect example. Development, when you can buy a trophy deal or a A- deal and it stabilizes at a 5.5, say you buy a multi deal at a high 4s, stabilizes at a 5.5, why would you invest in development capital, right? Unless you can get to a 7 yield on cost or something like that, untrended. Yeah. Now, that used to be a 5, right? So yes, rates came in 25 basis points. There's still a far ways for that to move, right, before people adjust their return expectations. Yeah, there's that gap, that bid-ask spread. And I think that remains, at least until 2026.
Yeah, Lou was sitting in your chair just before you last week, and I asked him about.
Lou's much smarter than me.
Well, he loves loves escape rooms, he loves pickleball, and he loves his sports memorabilia.
Yes,
and maybe he makes a unique wager every now and then. But I asked him about the recent 25 bip reduction in rates, and I said, "Is that really going to do anything?" I was surprised by his answer. He said he thinks it will. And I asked him, I said, why? He said, to just talk about it is one thing, but to see it in action changes people's mindsets, even if it was just 25 basis points. So I don't know if you've seen a change over the last, week or two since we've had the reduction of people now wanting to transact because the Fed actually reduced rates and indicated another 25 to 50 bip.
I think that was already assumed. But I agree that you're saying it's a conversation. Like, what's the result? There's this anticipation leading up to it, and then what does the Fed say in their comments, and how does that translate into future action? Now, the financing market, it has been incredibly robust. You've seen it over the last 2 years, and it continues to happen. And spreads are presumably coming in, the base rates coming in. So, from a financing standpoint, it's a great conversation. But to what you were saying, we've yet to see required returns come in at this point, right? Because it's not just, yes, cost of capital is important, but it's also fundamentals. Like, what do the fundamentals look like? Okay, if you look at multifamily, it's great for multifamily because people still can't buy homes, right? Because it's still, yes, mortgage rates have come in from 7 in your low 6s, but it's still prohibitively expensive for first-time homeowners to buy homes. So that helps on the multifamily market. Right. So yes, California underserved. No one's building new market rate apartments. So that helps with that. But it still hasn't translated into, cost of capital requirements changing. You're still not seeing core plus. And that's the huge gap that we're missing in this market. Right. There's no real core plus capital. If you have that capital, you really can have your pick of transactions. Right. It's still kind of what's your value add, what's your opportunistic returns like. When you say 18, that's pretty common. Like, if people are looking for 16 to 18s, it's tough to say, I'm out there with a good 12 or 13.
Yeah, no, and I have clients that, we help clients with introductions to capital as well. And, they'll present a deal that has a 12, 13% return, and they're expecting there to be capital for that type of core type product. And it's crickets.
Listen, I think optically that plays into how you value an asset. Right, you may still get to the same value, But say there's a multifamily deal, right? And there's in-place rents, right? But you may underwrite lower in-place rents with some growth rates, right? To get to a higher rent in year, 2 or 3, right? Just so you can show that value add return versus if you market today, it's more core, right? You're probably ending up the same value, maybe get a little bit higher, but optically you want to show that teens return, versus like the 11 or 12.
Yeah. Let's talk geography and location, especially West Coast. I do have a couple clients that have transacted recently in downtown LA, but the majority of my clients won't even touch it. Portland, we hear about Trump wanting to bring in the federal government to clean up Portland. Most of my clients, I would say probably all of my clients, won't touch Portland. Seattle, maybe more people are interested in Seattle. Just closed a 3-pack of multifamily for a client recently, getting more traction. I was recently in San Francisco. I was blown away. For 3 years, we've been hearing of how unsafe it is, homeless problems, people going into a Walgreens, stealing shampoo, whatever the case. Hotel rates on a Tuesday or Wednesday night, $1,500 a night for a Hyatt Regency because a couple of conferences were in town. People walking about on the streets, maybe a homeless person or two, but nothing of the epidemic that we've been hearing. And so the perception is that San Francisco, the bottom was 12 months ago, and it has been roaring back. Curious of what your perceptions are of sort of the main West Coast markets.
Yeah, you're absolutely. San Francisco I don't think it's a surprise, right? Obviously the availability rate, you talk about office, right? The availability rate, I think for there got like 25-30%, but there was a catalyst, right? There's always a catalyst as it relates to technology or kind of like ancillary industries. And you're seeing that now with AI. And that was a market that the institutions were waiting to invest in, right? At a basis, just for the right entry point. So I think they had a shift in the political landscape, right? And you have a mayor there who's a big family who came in and was listening to the local businesses and is really taking action. Now it's not a slow process, but you're starting to see that evolve. You've yet to see that in those other markets. I think Seattle, there's a little bit of a political shift that'll probably be a little bit more positive. I think LA is, I hate to say it, it's still, as you talk to people from the outside, right, there's still like this super negative connotation about the political landscape here. And that's really difficult. And Portland is not dissimilar. Now, Portland, you won't see people necessarily buy office, but the multifamily market, you've seen some transactions. You're mentioning downtown LA. Most of these trades, office, it's private capital. On the multi side, it just has to be so cheap. And we've had a couple of deals down there. We know a few things have traded. You will see institutional investors on the bid sheet, right? But that is a real discount to replacement cost. So they're looking at it like, geez, it's $700,000 a unit to build, and I can buy this at $300,000 a unit. What am I missing? Or $300,000 to $400,000 a unit. So you will see on the multi side downtown, select institutional investors go in there. On the office side, be very difficult to do.
But what do you think capital is more concerned about? The political landscape of a Los Angeles or a West Coast market, but it's still a supply constrained market. They know that it's very difficult to build in these markets. Or are they more concerned about an oversupplied Sunbelt market where maybe the political, you have political support, but yet you could build to your heart's desired and declining rent, declining absorption, endless supply? Where are they more concerned?
Yeah, I think, it's interesting about the Sunbelt because I remember we were selling deals in 2020, 2021, 22. Like we worked on, I remember a big deal in Orlando. All right. It was like 1,200 units of, I would say B multi, which is generous, really generous, but it was a value add return. And we sold it at like a 2.8 cap, right?
What year?
This was probably 22.
All right. So it's like probably spring of 22, height of the market before.
It was like a, I said like a 2.8 cap and they financed it. It was like a, 2.5 floating rate debt. You wonder where that is right now, right? And that's a lot of units.
I can tell you where that is.
Yeah, no, I know. Yeah. So I don't think you've heard about the pain just yet on the multi side, but I think that will come because your point, there was a lot of dollars who went into the Sunbelt. Yes, the oversupply, but I think people are, whether they talk about red or blue states, right? People are focusing on the more, getting back to the politics, right? That's really a driver of where you have business friendly environment and where people really want to go and live.
So what I've been seeing more capital flowing is business-minded areas of blue states. So supply-constrained markets, but in a business-friendly micro city. So maybe not city of LA, but Orange County, South Bay, El Segundo, or like Ventura up.
Newport, yeah.
Newport. And then parts of Seattle, same thing. In that metropolitan area.
Well, I think for Seattle, right? Yes, you have the huge monster technology companies there, right? They kind of hit pause. And I can't speak exactly to it, but I do think a lot of the news out there probably wasn't 100% accurate, right? About the Amazons and Microsofts. So yes, they were probably on pause, kind of reconfiguring their space needs, but they weren't pulling out of the market, right? So they're still there. So the office market in certain pockets will come back, right? Because those tenants aren't leaving those markets. So when you talk about other micro markets around LA, you're right. Like, I love El Segundo. Like, and maybe I'm a little jaded because when I first moved out here, that was an area that I really focused on. It just made a lot of sense, right? The single story, the multi-story. You saw the infrastructure that was in place and the affordability of the employees who are living around there and the accessibility. Even people traveling from, say, like the Palisades or Malibu. I know it's far, but being able to go down the west side, right? And those office buildings to me made sense. Now, some of the other pedestrian office buildings, where you have 20, 30% vacancy, like who fills those again in other markets? Like downtown, unfortunately, not to like beat on that, there's gonna be like 4 or 5 buildings that really survive of the big institutional buildings. Now there'll be families who will buy, right? And they'll have
4 to 5 buildings.
I'm exaggerating.
Yeah.
I'm talking about like the big towers.
Sure.
Right. Like you look at City National Plaza, like I think it's like 100% leased now, the Commonwealth owns, or US Bank Tower. Which Silverstein owns, and you're seeing traction. So some of those bigger institutional buildings, but there's going to be an opportunity like these cycles that's why families are buying, because they look at the long-term benefits of owning real estate.
Yeah, well, I mean, especially families that are from Southern California who saw downtown and what it was. Even after Staples Center was built, I mean that 10, 15-year period, downtown was where all the offices wanted to be. And there was a migration to downtown from the west side, from Pasadena, with the restaurants and the sports and living and grocery. And then COVID just, it lit the fire. Yeah. Probably shouldn't say that to a Palisadian. We could talk about that. And then it just, the exodus was nothing like I'd ever seen.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's funny. I remember coming out here for conferences, and I'm from New Jersey. My wife's from LA. And I remember going around like downtown at LA Live and calling her, like, this place is great. She's like, I've been there 3 times in my life. Right? I was like, what do you mean? Like, it's great. Because, to me, someone who's coming from like a city like New York, to me, that's a city. Right. And that's where I would move if I was young. And, it's walkable and you have restaurants and it was affordable. Right. And you're right. It was unfortunate because also a lot of deals that we worked on. I remember even at Eastville, we were selling a lot of funds, for like Broadway Partners and like Beacon Capital. And they all own big buildings downtown. And to me, that was like what LA was.
When are New Yorkers going to realize that LA is different than New York? LA is about, you can go to the beach, you can hike, you can have a home and a pool and still be within 15, 20 minutes, well, some people, of their work. It's just different. We're not a dense.
Well, I do appreciate it. My commute used to be was like an hour and a half when I was in New Jersey to New York. And the fact that I'm
mass transit, or
I would go to the train, take the train in, walk, take the subway, walk. It was a process. I love driving now. Like we were a little spoiled in the Palisades, right? Because Century City was like a 30-minute drive. Now the fires were a little different because I'd have to then go back west to drop my kids at school, and it was like a Formula One race on Sunset every morning. But I appreciate the non-commuting aspect of getting onto a train. Now, a lot of people love it because, it's your process, it's your regimen, it's thoughtless. I like being on my own schedule.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I've said if you can live within, let's say, a 30-minute commute of where you work in LA, you've made it, and your whole existence, your whole love of the city just changes when it goes 45 minutes to an hour. But it's not as easy. It's expensive to live near where all the jobs are.
I was thinking that I want to get back to your question before about the interest rates, because I don't think it's as straightforward, right? Because there's a lot of factors, right? It's cost of capital combined with fundamentals, right? So you have to look at various markets where underwritten returns have not changed, right? But the biggest question with certain asset classes, and I don't want to pick on office, because if I was as a generalist and if I was an investor, I would be focusing on office, because the biggest question is what's the residual? Like, these assets are big. There's a lot of capital. Eventually, people are going to transition back into office just because they have to. And there's going to be a lot of money made there. But the question is, it's not necessarily the interest rates. It's like, what do the fundamentals look like, right? What is the new paradigm? Like, I remember when I first started, when I was underwriting office deals, even 20 years ago, as a joke, you'd put in like $55 for TIs and $25 for renewal. Like, when is that ever the case? Like, that the TIs are, but people bought off on it and certain growth rates, right, just to buy the deals. I think people have become a lot more cerebral in their approach and how they look at deals, and they're sensitizing them a lot differently. So it's how they're looking at the fundamental composition of the deal versus, am I getting an 18 and what's my cap rate? What's my per pound? It used to be you could point to one metrics. There's 4 to 5 metrics that you look at now to buy deals. And I think cost of capital is just one that plays into it.
Sure. I would be doing a disservice to our fellow Palisadians if I didn't talk about the Palisades, given that you live there. I shouldn't say you're from there. You're from the East Coast. Gosh, of all the places you could have chosen to live in LA, why did you have to choose the Palisades?
So, well, twofold. I decided to move a little late in the year, and I needed good public schools.
Yeah.
So the Palisades had the best public school system. And I happen to know a lot of real estate people that lived in the Palisades. So, when I would go and visit, and then when we're looking around it. And then lastly, it's the closest thing to an East Coast suburb. Like where we came from, where I grew up, in the town that I lived in for 10 years before, it was a community, right? And like, it was walkable. Like, you lived close to the village. I lived close to the village. Our kids would walk. They'd go to Garden Cafe. Mm-hmm. You knew where they were. They'd ride bikes. And my wife grew up in the Hollywood Hills. And she's like, this is not Los Angeles. And when you got the sense of that community, that's exactly why we moved there. And it was a really special place. So it was that together with the schools. And I thought it was great. Like, I'm going to move to LA and my 3 kids are going to go to public school. And this is, put the taxes aside, I'm not paying for school, and it's fantastic. So those were all the reasons. And, so I hope the community comes back. So talk about we don't have to talk about January 7th and that whole ordeal. Oh, we can. We were total idiots because we didn't take anything.
Kevin, you're not the only one. You're looking at an idiot.
I was at my house till 4:00.
Because we know, here's what I said. And look, I'm sure my audience is tired of hearing my story. I did a whole podcast on my story.
Yeah.
But most of the people who lived where we lived in the Palisades, close to the village, not hillside, never in our wildest dreams thought the fire would have gotten to us. And I said to my neighbor that if the fire gets to our house, and this was about 1 p.m., if the fire gets to our house, the entire neighborhood is gone. And that won't happen. And sure enough, 10 hours later, the whole neighborhood was gone. So I beat myself up that I didn't take more things. I literally had my wife's jewelry box in my hands, and she said, put it down.
How about when my wife's like, should we take petty cash? I'm like, no, just leave it there.
That, like the $2 million of cash.
Yeah, exactly. Not a lot, but it's like an envelope.
I know.
And like, I'm like, I don't want to be back. She's like, how hard is it to bring cash?
Cash, jewelry, necklaces, whatever.
Well, the funny thing is, like, I had so much stuff on external hard drives. And for the reason, if you have a fire, but like, if a fire for your house is burning down, not if like, maybe it happens. Yeah. So I had boxes of, my parents sold the house I grew up in, and I had stuff from my childhood. I had boxes of stuff from college that I had from VHS camcorders that I never digitized. And it was in a box for a reason. And you look at that stuff, and that's the bummer.
Absolutely. My bar mitzvah video.
Me too.
How about my high school football games where I was a kickoff returner for Beverly Hills High School, returning those kicks?
Yeah.
It's those things that I want to show my kids. And how do you get that back?
No, I know. And I had this, and my wife actually had put everything from tapes on discs, and I had them on discs, and I meant to put them
on a cloud.
On a cloud.
Yeah.
And I never did.
I tell everyone now, if you have old photos, digitize, not just that, you have to get them on the cloud, everything. Talk about your rebuilding plan.
Yeah. So We are one of the few that's pretty far along.
I saw the picture. It was amazing.
So we
totally framed house.
Totally framed house. Well, we had a spec house, which is good and the bad. I would never buy a spec house again, but on the good side, we had original plans. So the plans that were stamped, can't say it was totally smooth. It's not like they expedited it right away. We had a couple bumps with stamp plans. So we are where we are.
Your house is basically all
framed. So now we move quickly. Like I'm using the same contractor who built the house, not the company, but the contractor. And I really get insurance. It was more lucky than smart because, I didn't really know the composition of my insurance policy, but it happened to be, pretty good. And I had a 2% mortgage. So, with combination of all that, like the mortgage is probably the best asset I have. So I wanted to move quickly. And I have one kid who's in college now. I have a freshman, I have a 7th grader. And we all of us went through COVID, went through the move. My kids have gone through a lot. And I just wanted them to have a house at this point. And we were living in an apartment in West Hollywood. We're renting a house right now. We're going to be, and we joke, we're definitely going to be the only house in the neighborhood for a while. But I'm okay with that. So as long as my kids have like their own bed and their own room.
That was the issue for us of being, you want to win every race you compete in. Do you want to win this race? For you want to win this race. You want to be first. I mean, yes, you'd rather have more neighbors, but psychologically, it's okay for you to be one of the first on your street.
I probably reacted more than thought. Mm-hmm. Right. And you're right, because we talk about that. And on our street, we still have people who haven't cleared their lots. And we are going to be we may be the only people there for a long time. And I wonder, is there going to be a supermarket? Right? Are they going to be the things we're used to? Like, some of the things we took for granted, like the farmer's market, which is amazing, and the community and seeing everyone there. I have to be okay with it. Like, am I 100% okay with it? Absolutely not. Right. I need to probably get different tires on my cars. Right. Because they're going to have to be like, military grade because of all.
I heard yesterday.
I'm just thinking through that.
No, I heard the roads are just
they're torn up. And on top of it is like when all the materials come through, what's going to happen? And I joke that, we're going to have amazing water views and ample parking for a long time, right? which you knew was the problem.
And then you're going to be upset when those neighbors build their houses because the views and the sunlight's going to be diminished.
Totally. But I want a home, right? We're in a house now. I want our home back, which we're missing. And I need, for my kids in particular, have moved around so much at this point. I just want them to, at least my daughter, who by the time we're finished will have 2.5, 3 years left. And my son will have 4+ years just to live out like that childhood versus just being, nomadic at this point.
There are no right answers or no wrong answers. I should say there are no wrong answers. There are all right answers. Yeah. Because it's whatever is right for you and your family. And there's going to be 5,000 different decisions that are made.
Listen, I think what we're all going to miss is the charm, right? And I think that gets lost on a lot of people who are not from here, who think of the Palisades as a certain type of place, not understanding the combination of the old and new, which was like so nice, of the people that have been there for 75 years, and then the new people like us, right? So it doesn't look like one big housing complex, right? It looks like kind of like this, mosaic of people that have been there for a long time.
Well said. Yeah, absolutely. Well, I can't wait to, if I'm invited to go check out the house.
We're going to have
open house
January, February 27, hopefully have a party, maybe on an open field, open lot, borrow somebody's, no noise complaints.
I love it. No, I can't wait. Be ready for the world famous lightning round of Real Talk. Oof. Now, you have not seen these questions, right? So you can confirm that, Mr. Kevin Donner. You have not seen these questions?
Yeah, I thought you were going to talk more about baseball playoffs, but that's fine.
Well, let's just start. Who's going to win the World Series?
Yankees.
I
still have my season tickets. I won't give them up.
Yeah? All right. So revenge on last year, Yankees-Dodgers? Or you don't think the Dodgers are coming out of the National League? The more challenging league, I should say.
Wow, that's interesting. I think we get a repeat of the two. I think the Yankees win.
Okay. All right. You heard it here. I was going to say East Coast or West Coast. What's better living?
East Coast.
Okay.
I'll tell you why. Four seasons. I miss the 4 seasons.
Yeah. Not the hotel, but seasons.
You can't. I mean, there's no substitute for how awesome the weather here is. Yeah. But I'm like a skier. I'm an outdoors person, and I miss the fall. But I mean, the weather here is spectacular.
I mean, 72 degrees and sunny most days. I agree with you. But when it's below zero in January in New York, I think you prefer living here.
But you know what? Before you go on, the one thing that surprised me, I was so used to Memorial Day symbolizing summer and everyone getting so excited. I was so shocked. Like my first year out here, Memorial Day came. It was just like another day.
Yeah, we don't, the holiday, 4th of July is a big day here, but you're right. It's when summer is year round.
Yeah, no, exactly.
I was in Chicago for 7 years and the summers were electric.
Yeah.
You know, all the bars go outside and the beer gardens and the beach. Yes, there are beaches in Chicago on Lake Michigan.
Yeah.
Everyone's playing volleyball. It's just more fun. It's just the same.
It's a different vibe, yeah.
All right, you've been at Eastville, Cushman, Newmark. Brokers are legendary for their boondoggles. What's the best boondoggle you've ever been on?
Best boondoggle. I'm biased towards skiing.
Mm-hmm.
So we used to run a small trip to, not to small, to Snowbird, which I think is a great.
I want to take my daughter there.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Listen, it's no frills, but I love the mountain. You get guides, you stay right there. It's a great way for people to spend time together and you're isolated.
Yeah, it's true. It's right there, tucked away, and best airport, I think, Salt Lake City.
Everything's 45 minutes.
It's easy. Celebrity childhood crush.
Alyssa Milano.
I like that one.
Yeah.
Who's the boss?
Yeah. Only person I ever had on my wall.
We'll leave it there. Favorite podcast besides Real Talk?
I'd say the early days of Smartless.
Yeah, I don't listen to it anymore.
Early days.
I agree with you. How about the best show you're currently watching or just finished?
Ooh, I binge watched a lot of content recently. I really like Platonic.
What? I've never heard of it.
Oh, Seth Rogen.
Yeah.
On Apple.
Apple?
Yeah.
Platonic.
Yeah.
Okay.
More funny. I mean, I went through this summer. I'm by myself because we have a beach house in New Jersey. My wife's there all summer. The amount of content. I mean, I ripped through a lot.
I just watched last night with my wife the Charlie Sheen documentary.
Unbelievable.
It's just nuts.
It's incredible. And I mean,
The fact that he's still alive.
but how candid he was too.
And then he flew a commercial airliner drunk.
Yeah.
That's
And then they're like,
pretty scary.
maybe we should take the handles back from you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The market that gets the most positive response from capital.
Miami.
Yeah. It's still hot.
Yeah.
How about the market?
I think also with what you're going to, with what's expected in New York, you're going to see people reinvigorated of flocking down there.
Oh, after the mayor election, huh?
Yeah.
What about the market that gets the worst reception?
Downtown LA. I'm keeping it
Tight.
Yeah. Not because it'd be unfair to paint a broad brush.
If you weren't in the real estate business, what would you be doing?
Sports reporter.
I like that. Yeah, I always tell people sports executive.
And then hopefully parlay that into something in sports business. I actually had written a business plan about like a sports show focusing on athletes who are in various sports businesses. And this was like 25 years ago. And obviously it happened.
You could have been like George Costanza and Seinfeld, who ran the Yankees.
So by the way, it's really funny. After the fires, I'd reached out to the Yankees and it was kind of disappointing. I was like, listen, I'd lost 30, 40 years worth of memorabilia, including seats I had from the original Yankee Stadium. I'm like, I have all these shirts, all these hats and jerseys. Can you send me something? It was actually pretty disappointing. They didn't send me a lot, but they sent me a bunch of bobbleheads. One is a Costanza bobblehead, which of anything, that was worth it.
Well, they sent you something, so that's nice.
Well, I did hound them for it.
Yeah. All right, last question. How long before the Palisades returns to normal?
7 years.
Yeah.
I wanted to say 5, but that'd be unrealistic. And I want to say 10. That's too conservative.
2032. It's a long time.
Yeah.
Look, Kevin, I know I started at the outset. I'm amazed that you've only been in LA for 4 years because I feel like you are a figurehead in the real estate community. And so kudos to you for penetrating our region and our industry here. But knowing you for the last few years, I have no doubt that you have become like one of the kings of LA real estate. So I appreciate you coming on and thank you for your time.
Well, I thank you for saying that. I mean, not yet, but listen, I I will say, when people ask me the difference between New York and LA, and I'm not saying anything bad about New York, I've really liked all the people in our industry. Genuinely, you get a very good feeling. And we all came up in the business with people from the time we were 22 to where we are now, 50 years old. But you also knew what people were like then and what they are now, and see how people have changed. I've truly enjoyed meeting the people here. And I thank you. And I know, we have a group of friends and we're in the Palisades and we'd all get together. And I know you and I tried to do that a lot. So I appreciate, everything you're saying. I have a long way to go. But I'm here for a long time and hoping to continue to build and evolve.
I love it. Well, thanks again for coming on. I appreciate it. Best of luck. And that's another episode of Real Talk.
Thank you.
You've been listening to Real Talk, Real Estate Discussions with Andrew Kirsh. You can catch prior episodes at sklarkirsh.com and on YouTube, LinkedIn, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and more. Thank you for your positive reviews, comments, and for sharing this show with others.